Welcome back to the Forensics Detailing channel. Today we're going to be covering how to clean your engine bay.
So it came to this, got there all too fast. All you can hope for, turn right on into dust. My sweet Lord, where I'm bound, won't you help me get my feet back on the ground? My sweet Lord, where am I bound? Won't you help me get my feet back on the ground?
Welcome back to the channel. So today we're covering engine bay detailing or engine bay cleaning. First thing I want to do is run through all the equipment you're going to need. So first up, chemical choices. You're looking for products that can degrease. So generally I don't recommend that you go and buy a bespoke engine cleaner, you know, like the JML 2000 engine bay cleaner that's already diluted down to a certain concentration. You pay, you know, 10-15 quid for 500 ml of it. You really do not need to do that. If you've got those products, fine. If they work for you, great. But what I'd say is your general purpose APCs at higher concentrations typically have a good ability to degrease. The one that I recommend, the Bilt Hamber Surfex HD, is an excellent degreaser, okay? And at higher concentrations, they say you can use it up to 10%. So 10% product rest water. You could even go a little bit higher than that for really heavy degreasing, up to maybe 25% if you've literally got thick grease in the engine bay. You don't need to use it neat, but it breaks down dirt and grease really well. Another APC which I really recommend, and I'm about to run out of, and I will be going buying some more, and that doesn't happen often, so it's a really good product. I can continue to use it. Meguiars all-purpose APC, slightly more soapy and foamy than the Surfex HD, perhaps a better all-rounder and more suitable for interior stuff cleaning, perhaps a little bit milder, but at higher concentrations, again, great for the engine bay. The reason I'm using two is I can use the Surfex HD at the higher concentration for the degreasing. Then I have this already mixed down at a lower rate, just for where I don't need to be plastering on heavy concentrations of product for areas that are less dirty. So you can do one APC, you can do two, but Bilt Hamber, Surfex HD, or Meguiars all-purpose cleaner will serve you well in this task of cleaning your engine bay. The next product that I'll have available when I'm doing engine bays is I'll mix up a bucket, again steaming hot water from the hot water tap inside, and citrus pre-wash, okay, at reasonably high concentration, so enough so that you get a good amount of foam. And then I'll soak my microfibers in those buckets. Next up, your brushes, guys. Now I find when cleaning an engine bay out, it's worth just getting all your brushes out that are going to be of use and sticking them in your bucket. And I have a whole load of them. Your standard Hogs Hair brushes are going to serve you well. They're soft if there's any paintwork on, you know, gullies that are painted inside the car that you want to clear out. They'll get into places, they'll shift out the dirt. They're a little bit on the soft side though, so it's good to have a couple of more aggressive brushes that will really shift things and scrub on things. So I've got the Valetpro chemical resistance one and the Atlasta wheel brush, or it's a general purpose brush. Both of them have got plastic brush heads on them, so they're more aggressive, more chemical resistant. Really important to have a couple of small brushes, so two toothbrushes. You know, this is a detailing brush, you know, it's quite thick plastic, and just a standard toothbrush with less kind of softer toothbrush for just getting into certain places, worth having. I'll also use my little mini wool, what's it called? Wheel woolly. It's quite handy when you're doing the engine bay for certain things. And finally, a little kind of wire core brush for getting into areas. It's this little tip I use because I can bend it over and kind of get between lines where the toothbrush, where you want the brush all around it. So these type of brushes come in quite handy as well when you're doing out the engine bays. You also might want some larger brushes for when you're doing across the slam panels or the rear scuttles and stuff. I don't tend to use these much when I'm doing the engine bays. I just find the smaller brushes better. But any large brushes can also come in handy. So that lot will all go in the bucket, ready to go. Next up, the microfiber cloths we're going to be using. As I've mentioned before in this channel, if I'm doing any destructive cleaning tasks, I'll tend to use these Kirkland COSTCO microfiber. The main reason is they are going to get abused. They're going to get covered in grease. So they're never really going to be used on your paintwork after that point if you choose to use them that way. They're reasonably plush, okay, but the main reason is, like I say, they are dirt cheap, so I don't care about trashing these. I also, if I have any old buffing cloths which I've had for years, which have gone a bit coarser and they're no longer suitable, I call them relegated buffing cloths. These make great engine bay cleaners. It's almost feel a bit guilty using them, but like I say, I've had them for so long. They've lost all their softness, but they're still great at like rubbing out dirt and stuff, you know. So I will use these. I'll also use them because they're good at drying the insides of the engine bay out as well. And I'll wash all of this microfiber after it's been used in the engine bays at 60 degrees with a fair old amount of detergent. And if you pre-soak all this microfiber before you wash it, you can actually get it back to a really good clean standard as well, or okay standard, you know. Next up, dressings. Quite simply, Carpro PERL, and I'll mix this up at about 1 part product with 1 part water, and that will be used to dress everything in the engine bay. Done a separate review on this. It's got a good darkening effect. It dries, so you know it's not leaving a greasy film on the engine bay, which is important. And it's just probably my favourite at the moment, all-round rubber and vinyl dressing. So Carpro PERL. See the dedicated review on it if you're interested about this product. It's fantastic. You're also going to need a good microfiber applicator pad to apply your rubber and vinyl dressing. You're also going to need a water source, so a hose and a nozzle on the end of that hose that allows you to control the water flow. So don't just have it pouring out the end of the pipe. You know, you want some sort of gun on there that can stop and start the water, and you know, you can stream the water in different ways. So a water source you're going to need. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And finally, one optional bit of equipment which is really going to help you. You don't need it, not everyone's going to have it, but if you do have access to this sort of thing, it's going to help you with the engine bay. And that is, I'm using a leaf blower, okay? You can get proper detailing products like the Master Blaster and that. But the point is, a means of drying by blowing air is going to be really handy when you're doing this engine bay cleaning. Like I say, not everyone's going to have it. If you haven't, you just use your microfiber to dry the car out with. Before we run through the exact steps of cleaning the engine bay, the most important thing, you know, it's absolutely critical here, and that is for us to talk about the precautions you need to take when you're cleaning an engine bay. The first big dilemma you are going to be faced with is to pressure wash or not to pressure wash, okay? Now the first thing is, you will hear guys on forums telling you that they have pressure washed 10,000 engine bays. You know, they fill them up with snow foam, pressure wash them out, and they've never had a problem. You will also find guys that tell you if you pressure wash your engine bay, you're gonna blow the engine up. You know, you're gonna get water ingress, blow the engine up, short your battery out, and it's all gonna go horribly wrong. You're gonna ruin your car. Again, the reality is that both of those statements aren't really going into enough information to tell you what you need to do, okay, and to make a kind of informed decision about how you're going to clean your engine bay. The first thing is there are some components in the engine bay that you need to be aware of and that you need to treat with caution, okay? And you're all going to know what these are. You know, your batteries, your alternators, any electronic equipment. You know, most kind of ECUs, if they're in engine bays now, are in something called the housing, computer housing, which should be watertight, but not all of them are, okay? So you've got to be aware of any electrical equipment like computers, you know, ABS modules. Most of them are out the way in modern cars, and they've thought about this. You also need to be careful about fuse boxes and relay boxes that again, most of them are now inside kind of little cases and you have to pop the lid off to get to them. Not all of them are, or those cases have been taken off by a garage and not put back on. So any sort of exposed electrical connection, something you need to be cautious about, and you need to eyeball and have a look at what's going on in there and look out for things like this. Wiring connections, again, most new cars, the sockets and head shells, as you piece them together, they tend to have a kind of rubber lining inside the socket, which provides a watertight seal. And where the wires go into the socket or the head shell, they have these little kind of rubber plugs. And the whole point of that is to make this moisture and, you know, dampness in the air proof and moisture from water getting in there proof, so that all of those kind of metal components, you know, if it's copper wires or whatever, are protected and don't corrode. So most of the electronic connections in modern cars are good. So there's your first thing to be aware of. The newer the cars, this is a generalisation, and all I can do is generalise. You know, I can't start going through each of the 50,000 types of engines there are out there, you know, whatever. So I'm generalising. But the more modern the car, they tend to have thought about these things a little bit more, and they're a little bit safer. Perhaps the most important thing to talk about when you're cleaning your engine bay is the air intake system that the car's using. Be very careful about any modified kind of air filter system, the sports filters, your K&N type filters, okay? Because you start spraying, squirting water over those, the water will get inside, and when you turn the car on, it's going to suck that water up and you can destroy your engine, okay? That's the number one thing to keep an eye out for. So if they've got any sports air filters on, they need to be covered. The next thing with air intake systems to be aware of, the older air intake systems, if it's getting beyond 8 or 9 years old, well, just eyeball it. But a lot of them have little flexible sections, because obviously the engine's mounted on some sort of soft rubber mount points. The engine moves around a little bit when you're delivering that power. And you have this air intake system which is also mounted at certain points, and the whole lot moves. So typically the air intake systems have got little flexible sections. I think they call them like intake elbows. And they're constantly flexing, and the rubber of those, after they get to a certain age, and I don't know what that exact age is, but I've seen lots of them where they have crack sections on that air intake, and it isn't always enough, or the car doesn't have electronics to pick up the flow, you know, the alteration in flow. And there might not be any alteration in flow, because even though it might be cracked, they might be sealed enough. But when you're blasting those areas with pressurized water, or any type of water, okay, and you're scrubbing them with brushes, there is risks of water getting inside the air intake system. So that's one thing I'm always mindful of when I'm cleaning out an engine bay, is how the air intake system, you know, the condition of the air intake system, making sure that it's all sealed up, because also garages are always taking these things off for various jobs, because a lot of time to get access to the components, the air intake system has to come off. They're not always put back on properly, or they're damaged when they're put back on, the clips aren't tightened up or whatever, and there's gaps in there. So that's one thing you need to be really mindful of. So in summary, you need to have a good understanding of all of the components that are vulnerable to water, or you need to be considerate of when you're using water, and liquid cleaners and all that sort of stuff. And I can't tell you what they all are specifically for your engine, but I've talked about some rough guidelines of what they could be and what to look out for. So once you've identified those, you need to cover and protect them. And you can do that. A lot of people use cling film to do that, which works, you know, the old see-through shrink wrap, which is a good tip. You can also use plastic bags, which I find are good for the alternator, getting a plastic bag around it. You can also double up and you can put a towel over the alternator and then put a plastic bag over that, just in case any water does run through. The towel will just kind of soak that up. And that can be what I tend to do with the alternators. Like I said, if it's got a sports filter on it, I'll put a plastic bag and an elastic band around that filter. I will do whatever I feel, you know, I will do whatever I think is necessary to protect the components of that particular car. Of course, with the battery of most cars being in the front, when you're cleaning the engine bay out, a lot of times on cars that are older than 5 years, the battery housing where it's all stored gets filthy and covered with dirt. So a good tip can be to take the battery off, take the battery out of the car to access that point. And when the battery's away from the car, then if you're going to be putting water in there, that's the best time to do it once you've protected all the other components. So the more confident technically you are with what components are in your engine bay, how to check out your intake system, how to identify what components in there are water sensitive and how to protect them. The more comfortable you are with that side of it, then the more comfortable or confident you should be with using free-flowing water from a hose pipe, or even free-flowing water through a pressure washer at slightly lower pressure. You know, don't go firing it into there at higher pressures. You know, so you're using this water to rinse essentially. So, but like I say, the more confident you are with the components, the more confident you can be with your use of water to rinse. Okay, step one, hoovering out debris, okay? So there's going to be an element of dust and dirt in your engine bay that you're actually better off hoovering out rather than getting wet and having it kind of run down into lower spaces. You will also find typically there's lots of leaves and kind of cobwebs and grit and grime in some of the areas where, you know, the leaves can fall down into and around the radiator front where it all gets trapped in there. So a hoovering stage is really important. When you start hoovering, what I would actually do is check the underside of the bonnet first, because they have these heat shields and noise reduction kind of panels in there. You know, they're like carpet, and they vary in how they're actually made. They can, if it's an older engine bay, they can be filthy. You might even want to take those off and have a look at kind of wet vacuuming them if they're not too kind of perished. They're in good nick. My one just had some sort of dirt film in it and some bits of fluff and stuff, so I just had a soft attachment to the hoover and just went over that first. If you leave that last, or you hoover the engine bay out first, then hoover that you know, that heat shield thing, a lot of dirt can then fall down out of it when you're disturbing it and go on top of the engine bay. So start higher up, you know, where there's stuff to hoover, and then work your way down, get all of the loose debris out of the car with that hoover. The soft brush attachments are quite good as well if you want to just hoover up any dust, you know, that's over the top of the surface of the engine. You're not going to spend long doing this, guys. You want, you know, you can spend a day detailing out your engine bay if you like, but ultimately we're trying to get this done really quickly. So your hoovering should literally be 2 or 3 minutes, and you do it quickly, but you do it reasonably carefully. Step 2 will then go in and start putting down your degreaser or your product, and so you can actually start doing the cleaning. So this is a stage before you do that, you know, before we introduce wet chemicals, of making sure you've got all your components protected that we talked about. So in this particular instance, the engine bay that I was cleaning, you know, it's moderately dirty. I've never detailed it before, but I've given it a wipe down, you know. This is the first time I've cleaned it out properly. First thing to say about it, it's a really easy engine bay to clean actually. The battery is in the boot, which is nice. I didn't have to worry too much about that. It's a modern engine bay, so most of the components are sealed. You know, the air intake system is completely standard. It was all sealed up in good condition. The alternator was accessible so I could cover it. And there didn't seem to be anything else that I needed to be too worried about in that engine bay, okay? Okay, so the first thing I'll do then is lay out my degreaser. Like I said earlier on, I was using the Surfex HD around about 10 to 15% concentration. And anywhere where I see that kind of, that thick black layer of greasy film, I will spray that over. Areas that are just dusty with less kind of greasy dirt, I would use the Meguiars APC in the other bottle. It's just so I'm not overloading the engine bay with degreaser in areas where it doesn't need it, okay? So you don't need to have 2, but you know, I had them ready mixed, so you might as well use them. Once you've laid that product out, you just work it with the appropriate brush, okay? So generally if there's areas of paintwork in there or soft plastics, I'll just use this kind of softer Hogs Hair brush. If there was areas I couldn't access with that brush, I'd go in with a toothbrush. If it was scrubbing out a kind of metal component, you know, like a heat shield part, where I needed a bit more horsepower, I'd use the Atlasta brush, etc, etc. If it was in an area where I couldn't get the other brushes into because of the size of them, you know, then I might reach for this one. So you work your way around that engine bay using your product and doing lots of scrubbing, okay, until you have degreased all of the visible components in your engine bay. That's how I do it. You know, you can start dismantling the engine bay if you want to go to extremes. You know, I could take out the air intake system, I could take off the engine cover, which is just a plastic shield, start cleaning underneath all of that. The level you can go to is limitless, but again, what I would say is it's down to you what you're looking to achieve. But for me, I want, when I open my engine bay up, I want all the areas that I can see, you know, to be relatively clean. There's areas underneath and in there, you know, that are going to be dirty that I'm not going to be too worried about, okay? You know, if you're into taking your cars to shows and stuff like that, then you might even be jacking the thing up, taking the under tray off and cleaning the sump plug and all that underneath area of the engine. We're not doing that in this video. You know, there are levels, and my level with how I use my car and what I want to get out of my car is I just want the engine bay to look similar to how it looked when the car was kind of brand new. And yeah, if I go poking my head right down there in some of the areas around the side with the torch, there'll be areas that I've missed. But like I say, if it's looking nice and clean and well dressed, that is good enough for me. So as well as doing all the kind of degreaser APCs and brush work all over your engine, I mentioned before having a bucket of citrus pre-wash filled up with hot water and a good amount of citrus pre-wash and soaking your microfiber in there. I just find that's really good for cleaning like big flatter surfaces, like the underside of your kind of bonnet. You know, you don't want to be going over that with a brush, it's going to take forever. So a soaked up microfiber, just gently wiping that over the surface is just a little bit more efficient for me at picking up all the dirt than brushing it. You know, I just find, you know, brushes are great and they're good at scrubbing, but also having a microfiber soaked in hot water is a handy thing to have when you're cleaning the engine bays, you know. The next step now is once you've finished cleaning everything with your brush work and your microfibers and your degreasers and your citrus pre-washes, and you know, often stuff in detailing is kind of like glamorous, you know, you see these sexy images of kind of car detailing being done. You know, and the reality of kind of detailing is that it's not that sexy, and it's more about scrubbing things and cleaning things, and cleaning out engine bays is a classic example of that. What I'd recommend when you do an engine bay is you do it as a completely separate activity to anything else. And the reason I say that is if you try and incorporate cleaning your engine bay as part of your normal maintenance wash, you end up, if you're like me, by the time you've washed the car, your concentration, your ability to focus and really clean it properly is gone. Whereas if you just say, right, I'm going to clean my engine bay out now, you can spend that hour or so, however long you want to do it, doing it properly rather than kind of doing it half-assed at the end of a maintenance wash. It'd be different for some people, and some people have more energy than me and like they can wash their car and keep going and going and going. But for me, after about an hour and a half of doing this, you know, I'm wanting to sit down and have a cup of tea. Or smoke if I've got one, but I'm giving up at the moment. So that's, you know, Mrs. caught me smoking the other day. I was a closet smoker, having the odd cigarette, so I'm trying to quit smoking at the moment. So I'm like a bear with a sore head. Next step, rinsing away all of this product. So you've gone through and you've cleaned all of your engine bay carefully using degreasers, you know, APCs, lots of brush work and microfiber and citrus pre-washing, and you've got all of that dirt kind of, you know, shifted and brushed off and moved or whatever, but you've got lots of kind of soapy product and detergent on there now you need to rinse away. So get your free-flowing water supply. It's a complicated way of saying get your hose. Obviously have one of those hose nozzle guns where you can turn the water on and off at, you know, at source, you know, where you're controlling it. And what I do is I put it on like the sprinkler at low pressure just so I can rinse that water away, and I'll use a brush and I'll just work, you know, it's a chance as you're rinsing to just do another little cleaning pass and disturb that dirt and kind of rinse it away. So this brush I'll use as I'm rinsing out, and I'll get all of that product and rinse it away from the car. That shouldn't take you too long at this stage. The next step is drying, okay? Now before I go in with the microfiber and start trying to dry everything by hand, the optional extra I talked about is the air dryer. So I've got this leaf blower here that I nicked off my mum. You know, they are dirt cheap, okay? They are handy. I was talking to someone about them the other day. I don't tend to use them for drying the car normally when I'm just doing a maintenance wash, because I find you're chasing the water on the panels a little bit, even if you've got protection. But they are really handy for drying areas where you cannot get a towel, like in your wheels and your wheel arches, all your lower grills, all your scuttles, all the little sort of recesses around the window, you know, the little bits that you can't get cloths into. So air is a handy drying mechanism, and when you're cleaning an engine bay, it is really handy, because your engine bay isn't one big large flat surface, it's 1,000,001 components and recesses and stuff. So it is a great option to have an electric leaf blower, or if you're really into your detailing, something like a master blaster, which we'll probably end up covering on the channel, to blow a lot of that water away before you then go in with your microfiber. So if you don't have the leaf blower, or after you've done the air drying, go in with your cloths, and if you don't have any relegated buffing cloths, which a lot of you might not do, just go in with your Kirkland microfiber and work your way around the engine bay, soaking up any of that loose liquid. And it'll also be you will pick up more grease and dirt, because engine bays are filthy, So soak up the water and pick up any little bits of dirt that you see with your microfiber. I will do the last bit of drying with these relegated Eagle F1s, because they're so much more absorbent, and like you can just, they make great drying kind of cloths, but obviously they're so expensive. I don't use them for this sort of function until I've had them for a few years and they've really deteriorated. The next step is dressing all the kind of rubber and plastic components of the engine bay, okay? And modern engines, they all have these kind of like black plastic panels that they stick on top of the engines. Cheap old way of making ugly engines kind of look half appealing. You have the logo on top and stuff, but for me, the old engines that actually used to look nice by design were the ones I liked. But anyway, the next step, you get your dressing. So here we're using Carpro PERL, mixed down 1:1. Spray it onto your applicator is the way I tend to do it, unless there's areas that I can't hit. So I'll spray it onto my applicator and cover all the sort of basic areas first, like the engine bay cover and the airbox system, the majority of the plastics. It's also, if you've got a nice soft clean brush, you can spray, you can spray it into areas that you can't get with the applicator. Don't go mad spraying it everywhere, but then once you've sprayed it into the little bits you can't hit with the applicator, you can work it in with your brush, etc, etc. And this is the bit you want to spend the time doing to get the nice finish. You can tell where you've applied the dressing to and where you haven't sometimes, so you don't want to be able to spot straight away areas you've missed. So spend the time dressing all the components properly. As well as doing all your vinyl and rubber dressings, there are engines out there that have chrome or bright work or metal badges in there, things that are kind of aesthetic showpieces of the engine bay. That was a nice clever word, wasn't it? And I used to own a lot of Alfa Romeos with the old Busso engines in them that had all these lovely chrome pipes. So depending on the engine, if you've got any of these metallic components, you might want to bust out a nice metal polish and bring some brightness back to those metal components. Some metal components in engine bays are not designed to be polished, and you'll see these kind of like aluminium looking components that are all rough, that get kind of like build up a little spots of oxidization on them. Don't try and polish those. You can just gently scrub off with a clean plastic brush any of that white residue. Don't try and wash it off. Just dry brush it off is the tip I give for that. But sort of chrome and other high quality metal finishes, then metal polish can bring those back to life on a bit of microfiber. So this was a kind of like basic guide to how to clean your engine bay. As always, the unspoken truth, how far you take this is down to you. You'll get people that start stripping out components, taking out the reservoir, taking out the intake system so they can gain further access to get more components. You'll get people that kind of will work underneath the car, get the car up on ramps or whatever, take the under tray off so that they can clean all of the underside of the engine and those components you can't see for some kind of show car level engine cleanliness. So we're not quite taking it to that extreme, because I've got to consider, who's watching this video. So this video isn't for how to produce a show car clean engine. It's supposed to be like a basic guide of what you need to be mindful of, perhaps some product recommendations, and like I said, some of those techniques about the order you should do things. But I really want to go back to the point about being mindful about the layout of your engine bay and identifying those components which you need to protect, and reiterating the point that if you're not sure what those components are, then be very careful about what you are getting wet or what you're covering with liquid products in your engine bay. I'd also like to know your thoughts about using kind of the pressure washers and delivering products into your engine bay through a snow foam lance, you know, or putting your degreasers there and rinsing off at a higher pressure. I've tried to do a video which is sort of highlights why it's perhaps not a good idea to do that all the time unless you've got that kind of knowledge of what you're cleaning. So it's striking the right balance. As always, I have used pressure washers in engine bays. I have laid out products with the snow foam lances. I generally don't do that depending on my knowledge of what I'm cleaning and whether it's my car or not, you know, and all those sorts of factors. But when you're doing a video kind of giving advice on other people to do it, I want you to tread very carefully with that area. And like I say, ultimately, if you're watching this video, you're going to have to be mindful of making the right decision about how to clean your engine bay. And this video is really just giving you some guidelines about some of the things you need to consider and some basic methods that you could kind of follow if you wanted to. Thank you very much for watching this video, guys, on how to clean out your engine bay. We've got a ton more stuff coming on the channel. I'm working my way through the list. I've got a backlog of about 10 more to get through, but I'm getting there, I'm getting them done. So we'll see you again very soon on the Forensics Detailing channel. Thank you very much for watching.